Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about understanding how to restructure and organisation. And the first thing is to think about that evolution is natural. It's something that happens in life, and it happens in business. And things will change. The organisation needs to change because it needs to think about matching new markets and the new environment that it might be in. It needs to change to realign its strategies and redesign the business, and that involves doing things with the people that are in the business too. So what businesses really need to do is to embrace change and not be afraid of it. And if change is done properly, then actually it's a really good thing. And what it does do is it keeps the organisation profitable if it's done in the right manner. So in the next 20 minutes, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to look at what a balanced scorecard is and why that can help us in understanding what we can do to restructure. We're going to look at how we can create a blueprint using the information that we've got so that we can consider all the skills and the knowledge and abilities that we need for the future. We'll look at how we can determine what the organisation structure should be, because we may need a new structure based on the changes that we want to make. And we'll consider how to get that structure that we want and look at the things that it might involve. And there are several things there. It might involve redundancy, it might involve moving people around, it might involve bringing new people on board. And then finally, we'll look at what has to happen once that restructure has taken place. So the first thing to think about is the balanced scorecard. And all that is, it's about business metrics, and they've been around for a long time. And in the early days, they were all about profit margins and reducing costs. But a couple of guys, Robert Kaplan and David Norton, have developed something called a balanced scorecard, which replaces early day metrics and is a really useful tool. And I love the analogy that they've got at the start of their book. They talk about going into an aircraft cockpit on a modern day aeroplane. And you go in and you see one instrument and you say to the pilot, well, what's that doing? What's it measuring? He says, oh, it's measuring airspeed. I'm working on airspeed at the moment. And you say to him, well, what about altitude? And he says, oh, I worked on altitude last week. I'm good at that now. So now I need to concentrate on airspeed. And you say, well, there's no fuel gauge. What about that? She says, oh, I can't concentrate on everything, too many things at once. I'll get airspeed right. I'll become excellent at that. Then I'll concentrate on fuel consumption perhaps next week. So I think on that basis, you'd probably say, I'm not flying with him, and you get off the aircraft. He hasn't got all the information that he needs to make decisions. And like the pilot, we actually need all the information available to us to make sensible decisions and to understand what's happening in the total business. And that's where the balanced scorecard comes in. Starts off with the vision and strategy. And these are things that are dealt with by the senior management team. They translate their ideas about the future direction of the business into objectives. So you've got the vision, which looks at the long-term aims and the aspirations of the firm, and then the strategy plan, and that's how you move towards the vision. The firm's moving towards the vision using this strategy. And then the scorecard focuses on 4 perspectives. The first one is financial, and that's all about financial performance. So it's looking at what turnover is wanted in the future years, what will the net profit be, what will the revenue streams be. It also focuses on the financial risks and a lot of analysis on cost-benefit data. We then have the internal systems. That's all about efficiency. It's about developing metrics to show how the business is running, to make sure that things are running as they should be. And it's about whether products and services are actually meeting the customers' requirements. Learning and growth is a key one for looking at what we do with our people in our organisation. So this is about knowledge, it's about innovation. It's about employees learning and developing and the kind of culture that we have in the organisation and the attitudes that we have as managers in the organisation about how we're going to improve. So we're looking at acquisition of knowledge, and that really is important to every organisation, as we'll see a little bit later on. So these metrics can then be developed to actually help us understand what we want to do as far as knowledge and skills and abilities are concerned when we're moving the business forward. Our final perspective is looking at the customer and looking at satisfaction, customer delight, as many people call it. If we don't have satisfied customers, then they'll go somewhere else, they'll find other suppliers. And if we have a poor customer performance, then that's going to actually decline our business. So we need to monitor this, and we need to understand what the impact will be if we lose customers because we're not doing things perhaps as we should do. So what does that give us? Well, it gives us what we call a balanced scorecard, which shows all aspects of the business that need to be managed, and we can see them all in one place. And like the aircraft, we actually need to keep an eye on everything that's going on. So we need to think about how we can use this knowledge that we've now got. And one of the things that research does show is that if you have pages and pages of documentation, it's not as effective as working with a few words and pictures to communicate. So what we're aiming for is a simple one-page blueprint or strategy map that can help us communicate the values and the competitive advantage that we want in the business. And the balanced scorecard is a way of dealing with that, looking at all the aspects of the business, including the mission, the values and the vision of that business, as we'll see in a minute. And looking at the 4 perspectives that we have, they link, and we start at the bottom with the learning and growth. And that one then feeds into the improved business processes, which lead to better service and better products for customers. And that results in more sales per customer and hopefully new customers too. In turn, that leads to better financial results. So we've perhaps got lower costs, we've got increased profitability and increased revenue coming from the sales, which is our financial aspect at the top. So moving through from learning and growth through to financial, and those are the elements of the balanced scorecard. Now, we could use expensive software with colourful dashboards and wonderful documentation to create the scorecard, or we can use a simple Excel sheet as we've done here. The achievement sections we would then colour code red, amber and green so that we can see immediately where we are. We have areas that perhaps are falling below what we're expecting. We can see amber areas we may need to give a little bit more consideration to so that we don't end up with them falling below what we are expecting them to achieve. And as part of this, we need to ask ourselves what skills, what abilities, what knowledge do we require to meet the needs of the business in all of the 4 perspectives. So let me give you a couple of examples. Let's think about a financial requirement. Let's say that we want to add £1 million to the turnover, and we know that each operative adds 100k. Then we'd need to employ 10 more operatives with the correct competencies to actually meet that objective that we've set ourselves. Another objective might be to if we reskill, we can add £2 million of turnover by tendering for businesses in a new market segment. So what we then have to do is upskill employees to make sure that they have the right competencies to deliver on the new market segment areas we want to move into. So the balanced scorecard gives us the business case for the restructure activity that we may need to undertake. So how do we get the information that gives us our definitive information on what we want? Well, we can think about the organisation as a system, and we can look at what happens in each part of the system. So anything in the white box is part of the company, and we can capture what's intended in the future in each of the aspects and subsystems of the business. So here we have an example of a goods wholesale firm, and we can see that we have various systems that come into play. So we have a customer system, suppliers, we need to deliver our product, we need to manage what we're doing, we need to manage stock, and all of these are different systems, with some of them with subsystems inside. We're not linking these systems at the moment. We're just catching the information that is needed within the organisation to deliver on our strategy. So this will give us the new requirements of the business from the information that we've collated on the balanced scorecard. But knowing how the system works and the subsystems work, that doesn't help us to make a change. What we need to understand is how we need to manage the activities in the business. So what we need to do is look at the each bit of the process and look at the inputs and the outputs. So if you look in the middle there, you'll see that you have an input, a process, and an output. And each subsystem is made up of processes. And basically the input is acted upon inside the process and an output appears. So what we've got in the example here is we have an input of customers, and we've two types of customers there, as you can see. And then the output, we're looking at profit, we're looking at deliveries, we're looking at satisfied customers. And this model can be used to determine exactly what's needed in each part of the company system. So let's look at a couple of examples here. If we take a product management system, then we can see that there's an input at A1. We've got past sales trends, we've got strategic marketing, and we've got a customer need. And at the end, at A5, we've a series of outputs. And in the middle, we've got 5 activities between the input and the output. And each of those activities is acted upon by a different role in the organisation. So looking at the product management system, A2, you can see that we have a role of product manager acting on that activity to determine the product. If we look at A3, we can see that product manager again is responsible for acting on that, so reaching agreements with suppliers. And we go through the whole organisation and work out what activities we have in each of the systems and subsystems and which role acts on that. And if you look at the order preparation system behind, you'll see that A1, we have a role called picking leader that is generating that picking list. And in A2, we actually have a picker, so a different role that's picking the products to order. And by working through the organisation and modelling the whole firm, we know exactly what roles are needed in the organisation. And we can also determine the units of effort required for each of the roles. So how much of each role do we need? And we can then develop our job descriptions and person specifications from that. And what we may find is that several roles fall inside one job description. So once we've got the structure, the activities and the roles, we can then determine what jobs are needed and how many of each job are needed. And the structure that we get is based on the information from the balanced scorecard. That's our blueprint for the organisation. And it's the balanced scorecard that gives us the business case for what's needed. And the business case is really important when a restructure is happening. A restructure should never ever happen without a business case being put in place. The business case is the justification, and I can't emphasize that too strongly. So what we will do is, having all the information that we've got, looking at the roles, looking at the activities, we can then develop the new job descriptions and the new specification, person specifications from the activity map. And what we'll find is that we perhaps have too many jobs in one area, maybe too few jobs in another area. Some of the work that we have in the organisation may go all together because we're taking a slightly different tack, and that may be replaced by new work. We may also find new technology requires less jobs in some areas, and also new skills based on new technologies. So what do? We have an idea now where we want to go, what we want to do with the restructure. So we just tell people that they're doing the new jobs based on our blueprint. Well, we could do, but actually that would be totally wrong. We can't do that. We can't simply move people around because we now have a new structure. People have terms and conditions of employment or statements of particulars or whatever individual organisations call them. But when we have contractual terms in place, we can't unilaterally change them. We have to go through a process. As an organisation, we're allowed to do what we will with the organisation. We're allowed to move it forward as the business owners, the senior managers see fit. But moving people around, changing what they do, has to be done inside a process, a restructure process. So what are we going to do and how are we going to manage that? Well, we need to consult with the people and we need to talk to them about what we're doing. So up to now, we've seen how the systems and subsystems have determined the organisation structure, and we've seen how the roles and the amount of effort that we need are developed, and how these then tell us what we need from the jobs in the role. So the jobs in the company. We can then produce our job descriptions and person specifications based on our requirements. Now, the new structure might mean that we've got jobs that are designed in a different way to previously. And again, as I've said before, that requirement comes from the blueprint. So we may need to train people to achieve the competencies that we need. We may need to recruit new competencies. And these are two strategies that we have to move the business forward when we're restructuring. And what we need to do is make sure that when we are making change, we are consulting fully with everybody before that new structure is put in place and during the restructure. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to bring people on board. We're going to perhaps lose people from the organisation through redundancies, and we're going to reskill people, and we're going to then get the new skills, the knowledge and the abilities that we want. All the evidence to help us understand what we need to do flows from the vision and the strategy via the balanced scorecard. So when we're looking at restructure, most restructures involve redundancy, and I could fill a whole session on a whole webinar on redundancy, and that's not really what this topic's all about. But what we do need to understand is that when we are restructuring, we are going to have disruption. We're going to have people moving out of the business. We're going to have people changing roles. And that's going to be disruptive for everybody that's involved, not just those that are perhaps being moved out of the organisation via redundancy. So there are lots of issues around a restructure. It's got to be done in the right way. Employment law comes into play, but that's an aspect for another day, the legal side of things. What we're focusing on here is how we actually move the business to the new structure. And we've talked about how we use our tools to do that. Once we understand what jobs we want, we can use this criteria to select what we need in the organisation moving forward based on the decisions we've made. So the new job criteria will help us understand what pools we may need to have when we're making people or potentially making people redundant. And that will help us decide who is going to be at risk of redundancy, who is going to be retrained, who is going to be moved into other roles, and the areas in the business where we need to buy in new resources and employ new people. Something to think about with the restructure, you're going to get people that are really upset. If you're starting to look at redundancies, then people take things personally, and the person they will focus on is the person that they see as the one making them redundant. So potentially their manager, if the manager's taking the meeting. And people do get very upset and they blame people quite easily. And they do things like throwing chairs around, which is something that happened to me once, and I learned then that I stay nearer the door than the person I'm talking to. So there's a learning curve for everybody who's involved in a restructure scenario. You also need to think about a restructure. Those people that are leaving the business, they are still ambassadors for the organisation. They'll talk. They're going to be upset that they've moved out of the business, but the organisation still really needs them to be saying, do you know what? I had to move out of that organisation, but they're a really good organisation to work for. Yeah, I'd love to go back there. You want people out there giving positive messages, even when we're dealing with negative situations. And then looking at the advantages of a restructure, we can realign the company to meet the new strategies that we've put in place, perhaps going into different markets or dealing with things in a different manner. We can keep and enhance the skills that we need as we move forward. So what about after restructure? It's not all plain sailing straight away. It's once people have been made redundant, it's not the end. Employees still feel vulnerable. Those that are left in the business are picking up work. They're thinking, when's it going to happen again? Do I need to start looking for another job? So there's a lot of work to do to bring the morale back to a sensible level within the organisation. So a lot of work to be done by managers, making sure that they are communicating with their staff so that people are starting to feel that they are a cohesive group once again. And it does take quite a while to do this. So restructures do take a long time. There's a lot of time and effort after the final people have left the business or moved into new roles. A lot of time taken to train these people in the new aspects of their business. So please do bear that in mind. So in summary, what have we covered? Well, we've talked about the fact that every company should have a vision and a strategy. It's not static. It does need to be worked on. Don't make it and stick it in a cupboard and then dust it off every 10 years. It should really be revisited on a regular basis and updated. The balanced scorecard is one method of catching all the data and the various perspectives that need to be considered, keep them in one place, and colour coding can actually help stop any slippage of the different aspects that we're looking at there. The new organisational structure that we get is going to be based on the strategy that we want to achieve, and we can use the organisational modelling to help us get there. We can see what activities we need in the organisation, how much effort we need to manage those activities, and then we can build our job descriptions, our new job descriptions from those. We also need to have new person specifications that inform the future requirements for the skills and the knowledge that we need within the business. People can then be redeployed, made redundant, or recruited based on our new job descriptions and person specifications. And we've talked about managing the restructure requirements. We need to consult. We need to do that before we start doing anything, during the restructure, and certainly after the restructure. And no unilateral changes to T's and C's. The process has got to be done properly. Good communication, we talked about that. That's going to be required with all those who remain to actually ensure that the restructure that we want to put in place actually works when we have put it in place. And once it's in place, we do need to monitor. We can't just leave it. We have to keep moving forward, keep revisiting that vision and strategy, checking that we're still on target. So, quick run through there of understanding how to restructure an organisation. And John, I don't know whether you've got any questions for me there.
Yeah, I've got just a couple of quick questions. What looks, let me just read. Yeah, Cheryl asks, one often hears about everyone in a firm being dismissed and invited to apply for their jobs again. Is that lawful, and is it good practice?
Okay, if somebody is dismissed during a redundancy, then and invited to apply to a role, they're not being invited to apply back for the role they've just come out of. If you think about the things that I've been talking about, we're looking at changing roles. So the job description, the new job description, will be different to the job description that was there previously. So we may be asking people to apply for roles, but that will be a different role to that they previously had. Where we have a number of people in the same role, and we need to say we've got 10 operatives in a role and we only need 6 operatives, in that case there would be definitely be a selection pool, a criteria put in place based on what we want from the skills and the knowledge and the competencies moving forward, and we would select the 6 that match best, and unfortunately the 4 at the bottom would be made redundant. But where we're looking at applying for new jobs, then it's a new job. It's not the same job.
Yeah, good, thanks. Okay. And one final question. Sarah just asked for clarification. You were talking about jobs and roles, and I didn't get the difference between them. Could you explain again the difference between the jobs and the roles?
Yep, okay. Certainly, jobs and roles do get used as meaning the same thing in a lot of organisations. What we're talking about when we talk about roles, we're talking about the specific role that might act on an activity within the business. So if you think about your own job, you will take on different roles. So one person, for instance, I'm a managing director of the organisation, but I might also act as a receptionist when I answer the phone. I might also act in different roles, picking up different activities within the organisation. So one job description can include lots of different roles. And where this comes into play is perhaps with our picker and our lead picker. We may have the lead picker picking up, they may be a picker and a lead picker, so they may pick up both of those roles. So roles can be amalgamated into a job, which will then have a job title.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you. And that's it then. That's all the questions, Sue. So thank you very much for that. And thanks to all for attending. Hope you found it informative. Now, we'll be running seminars every month. We've run quite a few so far, and the next one is on understanding how to manage sickness absence, and the flip side of that, which is well-being. So we've got sickness absence and well-being on the two, and you'll see the webinars as they come on the events tab at www.timelesstime.co.uk.